Vincent Hayes stood alone in his corner office on the 42nd floor, watching the city lights shimmer through the gathering darkness. At 38, he had built next-gen solutions from a college dorm project into a technology empire worth billions. The skyline of Seattle stretched before him like a circuit board, each building a connection point in the vast network of his success. Yet success had taught him something unexpected. The higher you climbed, the colder the air became. His reflection in the glass showed a man who looked younger than his years. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples. Sharp features that business magazines called commanding. But his eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of someone who had learned to stop feeling, to calculate instead of care, to measure life in profit margins rather than moments. The office behind him was immaculate. Modern furniture in shades of gray and chrome. Awards lined the walls like soldiers at attention. Everything had its place, its purpose, its function. Nothing wasted, nothing warm. It was exactly how he wanted it. A new presence 3 weeks ago. His world had shifted slightly when Olivia Bennett joined as his executive assistant. She was different from the others who had held the position. Where previous assistants had been efficient but distant, Olivia brought something else into the sterile environment. She remembered birthdays of the cleaning staff. She kept fresh flowers on her desk, even though no one required it. She said good morning as if she meant it. Vincent had noticed these things with the detached observation of a scientist noting data points. He told himself her warmth was simply her working style, nothing more. Yet he found himself listening for her voice in the hallway, noticing when she arrived each morning. Aware of the subtle jasmine scent of her perfume that lingered after she left his office, she was 29, with chestnut hair often pulled back in a practical bun and green eyes that seemed to see more than people wanted to show. She dressed professionally, but with small touches of personality. A silk scarf here, vintage earrings there. She was competent beyond measure, anticipating his needs before he voiced them. Organizing chaos into order with graceful efficiency, the forgotten file that Friday evening. Dark clouds had been building over Puget Sound all afternoon. By 6, most of the staff had left, eager to beat the storm home. Vincent remained, as always, working through quarterly projections that needed no immediate attention, but gave him a reason to avoid his empty penthouse at 7:30. His phone buzzed with a message from the legal department. They needed the signed merger documents for the Monday morning meeting. The physical copies, not the digital versions. He frowned, searching his memory. Olivia had mentioned organizing those files before she left. He stepped out of his office into the quiet expanse of the executive floor. Emergency lighting cast everything in soft amber. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and rain began to pepper the windows with increasing intensity. He crossed to Olivia's desk, neat as always, her computer screen dark. Her chair tucked in precisely. Vincent opened the top drawer slowly. Inside, folders were organized with colored tabs, each labeled in her careful handwriting. He found the merger documents immediately, exactly where they should be. As he lifted the folder, his hand brushed against something else. A photograph, old and worn, tucked beneath the files. The impossible image he should have left it alone. Should have closed the drawer and returned to his office. Instead, his fingers closed around the photograph's edge. Pulling it into the light, the world stopped. The image showed to young people on a beach. Wind whipping their hair, hands intertwined, laughing at something beyond the camera's view. The boy was barely recognizable as himself at 23, before the world had taught him to armor his heart. Before loss had carved away everything soft. The girl beside him was Grace Winters. Vincent's hand began to shake. He sank slowly into Olivia's chair, unable to look away from the photograph. Grace's smile, so bright it seemed to generate its own light. Her sundress catching the breeze, the way her hand fit perfectly in his, as if they were puzzle pieces designed to connect. He had not seen this photograph in 15 years. Had believed every image of them together had been lost in the fire that consumed his childhood home shortly after her death. He had told himself it was better that way. It's easier to forget without visual reminders of what he had lost. Memories unleashed, Grace had been everything to him once. They met in college, two dreamers who believed love and ambition could coexist. She studied environmental science while he coded in computer labs until dawn. They spent weekends hiking mountain trails, talking about the future they would build together. A future where his technology would help solve the climate problems she was passionate about, where their love would be the foundation for something meaningful. Then came that December night. Black ice on a mountain road. A phone call that shattered reality. Grace died instantly, the doctor had said, as if that made it easier. As if speed of death somehow lessened the magnitude of loss. Vincent had become someone else after that. The dreamer died with Grace. In his place rose a man who understood that caring was dangerous. That love was a vulnerability he could not afford. He built his company with ruthless focus, making decisions based on logic, never emotion. He dated occasionally, but never deeply. Maintaining relationships that were companionable, but never passionate. He became successful beyond measure. It's an empty beyond description. The question that changed everything now. Sitting at Olivia's desk in the dim emergency lighting, holding an impossible photograph, Vincent felt the carefully constructed walls around his heart develop cracks. How did Olivia have this picture? What connection could she possibly have to a past he had sealed away? Thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to make the windows rattle. Rain lashed against the glass in sheets, turning the city beyond into a watercolor blur. Vincent turned the photograph over with trembling fingers. On the back, in Grace's familiar handwriting, were words that hit him like a physical blow. Vincent and Grace, Olympic Peninsula, June 2010. Promise me you will remember how to smile like this again. Promise me you will find someone who makes you believe in tomorrow. He read the words 3 times, each reading driving them deeper into his chest. Grace had written this. Grace, who always believed in second chances, who insisted that love multiplied rather than divided, who made him promise before she died that he would not let grief consume him. He had broken that promise, had let grief do more than consume him, had let it hollow him out until nothing remained but ambition and achievement. Vincent sat in the darkness, holding the photograph against his chest, feeling something he had not allowed himself to feel in 15 years. The armor cracked. The ice began to thaw, and for the first time since Grace died, Vincent Hayes wept. The storm raged outside, but inside, in the quiet of that office, a different storm began, one that would either destroy him completely or teach him how to live again. When he finally stood, legs unsteady, the photograph still clutched in his hand, Vincent knew one thing with absolute certainty. Come Monday morning, he would ask Olivia Bennett a question that terrified him. How did she have this photograph? And more importantly, what did it mean that fate had placed it in his path after all these years? The rain continued its percussion against the windows as Vincent returned to his office. He placed the photograph on his desk, unable to put it away, unable to stop looking at the ghost of who he used to be. Somewhere in the building, the generators hummed. Somewhere in the city, life continued. But in that moment, Vincent Hayes existed in the space between his past and his future, holding a bridge made of photographic paper and old promises. The question was whether he had the courage to cross it. Monday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, as if the weekend storm had scrubbed the city clean. Vincent reached his office an hour earlier than usual, unable to sleep, unable to stop thinking about the photograph that now resided in his briefcase. He had spent the entire weekend staring at it, remembering things he thought he had successfully buried. Grace's laughter. The way she used to steal his coffee when she claimed hers was too bitter. How she fell asleep during movies but always denied it. The small things that made love real rather than romantic. The details that hurt most because they were so ordinary, so irreplaceable. He positioned himself at his desk, attempting to review reports. But his eyes kept drifting to the door, waiting. When Olivia arrived at exactly 8:30, her usual time, Vincent felt his heart rate increase in a way that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with fear of what he might learn. She entered with her typical grace, carrying 2 cups of coffee. One for herself, one for him, black with no sugar, exactly how he drank it. This small act of consideration, repeated daily, suddenly felt weighted with significance. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said, setting his coffee on the desk. Her smile was warm but professional. Showing no awareness that she had appended his entire world, Vincent cleared his throat. "Olivia, do you have a moment?" The connection revealed something in his tone made her pause. She studied his face with those perceptive green eyes, and he saw concern flicker across her features. "Of course. Is something wrong?" He retrieved the photograph from his briefcase, hands steadier than he expected. "Friday night, when I was looking for the merger documents, I found this in your desk drawer. I need to understand how you came to have it." Olivia's eyes widened as she recognized the image. Color drained from her face, replaced quickly by understanding and something that looked like compassion. She sank slowly into the chair across from his desk. "I wondered if you would find it," she said quietly. "Part of me hoped you would. How do you have this?" Vincent's voice came out rougher than intended. Olivia folded her hands in her lap, choosing her words carefully. "My father was Thomas Bennett. He grew up in the same neighborhood as Grace Winters. They were childhood friends, stayed close even after his family moved to Oregon." Vincent leaned forward, pieces of a puzzle he had not known existed beginning to form a picture. "I never met your father," Olivia agreed. "But he knew about you. Grace talked about you constantly in her letters to him. She trusted my father with things she could not tell anyone else. After the accident, Grace's mother could not bear to keep certain items. The memories were too painful. She gave some of Grace's personal belongings to my father for safekeeping." She paused, her voice softening. "That photograph was among them, along with letters, journals, small mementos Grace wanted preserved. My father kept them in a cedar chest in our attic. When he passed away last year from cancer, I found the chest while settling his estate." Understanding the pattern, Vincent sat back, processing this information. The universe had drawn a line between his past and present, connecting them through a man he had never met, now deceased, and his daughter who sat before him, unknowingly carrying pieces of his history. "Why did you bring the photograph to work?" he asked. Olivia's cheeks colored slightly. "When I accepted this position, I did not know you were the Vincent from Grace's stories. My father always referred to you as Vince. It was not until my second week here, when I saw an old article about NextGen's founding, that I realized the connection. The article mentioned your full name, Vincent Alexander Hayes, and detailed your background. That was Grace's Vincent." She met his eyes directly. "I brought the photograph because I thought you might want it back. I just had not found the right moment to give it to you. It felt too personal, too intrusive. How do you tell your boss that you possess pieces of his past?" Vincent found himself appreciating her honesty, her respect for boundaries, even as she held something precious to him. "You could have mentioned the connection when you realized—" "I considered it," Olivia admitted. "But you seemed like someone who had made peace with the past and moved on. I did not want to reopen old wounds." A bitter laugh escaped Vincent. "I did not make peace. I just stopped fighting." The cedar chest silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. Outside, the city hummed with morning traffic and the business of living. Inside this office, two people sat suspended in a moment that felt outside of time. "There are other items," Olivia said finally. "In the cedar chest, letters Grace wrote but never sent. A journal she kept during your last year together. I have not read them. They felt too private. But if you want them, they belong to you more than they belong to me." Vincent's throat tightened. The thought of reading Grace's private words, her unfiltered thoughts, filled him with equal parts longing and dread. "I do not know if I can." "You do not have to decide now," Olivia said gently. "They have waited 15 years. They can wait longer." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw something he had been too guarded to notice before. Olivia carried her own grief with quiet dignity. The loss of her father sat in her eyes, softened by time, but never truly absent. She understood loss not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality. "Your father," Vincent said. "Grace's letters to him. Did she mention me often?" Olivia's smile was sad and sweet. Constantly. She loved you completely, but she also worried about you. She wrote once that you had a tendency to build walls when you were afraid, that you protected yourself by becoming unreachable. She worried that if something happened to her, you would lock yourself away. The accuracy of Grace's predictions struck Vincent like a blow. She had known him better than he knew himself. Patterns of Grace over the following days. Vincent found himself observing Olivia with new awareness. He began to notice patterns that unsettled him. The way she hummed while organizing files, a melody that stirred distant memories. How she always chose window seats in the conference room, turning her face towards sunlight. Her habit of leaving small, encouraging notes for the junior staff. Just as Grace used to leave notes in his textbooks, these were not imitations or conscious choices. They were simply who Olivia was. Yet they created echoes of Grace so strong that sometimes Vincent had to look away, unable to bear the resemblance not in appearance but in spirit. One afternoon, during a rare, quiet moment, Vincent asked, "Did your father tell you stories about Grace?" Olivia looked up from her laptop, surprised by the personal question. "Many," he said. "She was the kind of person who made the world feel manageable. That she believed in impossible things and made you believe them too." "She did," Vincent agreed softly. "She believed I could change the world with technology. I told her it was naive, that one person could not make that much difference. She just smiled and said that was exactly why it had to be me, because I understood the obstacles." "Did you?" Olivia asked. "Change the world?" Vincent considered the question. NextGen had developed breakthrough renewable energy solutions, created technology that reduced carbon emissions, built systems that connected rural communities to vital resources. By any objective measure, he had achieved what Grace believed possible. "I changed industries," he said finally. "But I lost track of why it mattered. Grace wanted technology that helped people. I created technology that impressed investors." The lunch hour truth the next week, Olivia invited him to lunch at a small cafe near the waterfront. It was the first time they had met outside the office for reasons unrelated to business. They sat by a window overlooking Elliott Bay, watching ferries cross the gray-blue water. "I need to tell you something," Olivia said, stirring her tea. "I was not completely honest about taking this job." Vincent raised an eyebrow, waiting. "When I saw the job posting for your executive assistant, I recognized NextGen. I knew from my father's stories that this was your company. Part of me took the position because I wanted to see what kind of man you had become. Whether Grace's faith in you had been justified." "It sounds like judgment," Vincent said, though without anger. "It was," Olivia admitted. "At first. My father spent years keeping Grace's memory alive through stories. He loved her like a sister. When she died, part of him died too. He wanted to believe her death had meaning, that you had gone on to do the amazing things she knew you could." "And what did you conclude?" Vincent asked quietly. "After working for me?" Olivia met his eyes. "That you are brilliant and successful and deeply, profoundly lonely. That you built everything Grace dreamed of except the life she wanted for you. You created an empire, but forgot to create a home." The truth that hurts the words should have angered him. Instead, they settled over Vincent like recognition. Olivia had seen through the facade everyone else accepted as reality. "Grace made me promise something before she died," Vincent said, the words coming without planning. "We were in the hospital. She knew she was not going to make it. She held my hand and made me promise that I would not stop living." His voice cracked slightly. "I promised her. And then I spent 15 years doing exactly what she feared. I achieved everything and experienced nothing." Olivia reached across the table, her hand covering his briefly. The touch was not romantic, just human. Connection between two people who understood loss. "It is not too late," she said. "That is what Grace would tell you. It is never too late to remember how to live." They sat in silence, watching the water. Two people bound by a ghost who loved them both, though they had existed in her life at different times in different ways. When they returned to the office, something had shifted. Vincent no longer saw Olivia as just his assistant. She was a bridge between who he had been and who he might still become. And for the first time in 15 years, he felt the faintest stirring of possibility. That evening, alone in his penthouse, Vincent called Margaret, his housekeeper who had known him since childhood. She answered on the second ring. "Margaret," he said, "do you remember Grace?" There was a long pause. "Every day, Vincent. I remember her every day." "Tell me something about her I might have forgotten. Something small." Margaret's voice grew warm with memory. "She used to leave flowers on the doorstep every Sunday. Wild ones she picked on her morning runs. She said houses needed to remember they were homes." Vincent closed his eyes, the memory returning. He had forgotten that, had forgotten so many small kindnesses that made Grace who she was. "Thank you, Margaret," he whispered. After hanging up, Vincent stood at his window, looking out at the city, that had once felt like his kingdom and now felt like his cage. Somewhere out there, people were living, loving. Taking risks, he had convinced himself, were foolish. The photograph of him and Grace sat on his coffee table. Next to it, he placed his phone, Olivia's number still on the screen from when he had texted her about tomorrow's schedule. Two women, one who had loved him completely and taught him to dream. Another who carried that legacy without knowing she was showing him how to wake up. Vincent did not know what came next. But for the first time in 15 years, he wanted to find out. 2 weeks passed like water finding new channels through old stone. Vincent noticed changes in himself that both thrilled and terrified him. He laughed at a joke during a board meeting. He took lunch breaks instead of eating at his desk. Olivia about her weekend plans, not a small talk, but because he genuinely wanted to know. She had mentioned loving bookstores, the kind with creaky floors and the smell of old paper. So when Saturday arrived, Vincent found himself doing something he had not done in years. He made plans that had nothing to do with work. He texted Olivia. "There is a bookstore in Pioneer Square I think you would appreciate. Would you join me this afternoon? No work discussion, I promise." Her response came quickly. "I would love that. 2 o'clock?" Vincent stared at his phone, surprised by the flutter of nervousness in his chest. This was not a date. It was just two people who had become something resembling friends, spending time together. Yet his hands shook slightly as he typed his confirmation. The bookstore the afternoon sun cast long shadows through. Pioneer Square's historic streets when Vincent arrived at the bookstore. It was called Second Chapter, a name that felt almost too fitting. 3 stories of books crammed into a building that leaned slightly as if tired from holding so many stories. Olivia was waiting outside, dressed casually in jeans and a cream sweater, her hair down for the first time since he had known her. The transformation was startling. At work, she was polished and professional. Here, she looked younger, more relaxed, more herself. "You found it," she said, smiling. "I was worried you might change your mind." "I almost did," Vincent admitted. "I am not very good at this, at anything that does not involve spreadsheets and strategy." "Then we will start simple," Olivia said, leading him inside. Rule 1 of bookstore browsing: no destination. You wander until something calls to you. The store smelled exactly as she had described: old paper, dust, possibility. Narrow aisles twisted between shelves that reached toward pressed tin ceilings. Classical music played softly from unseen speakers. Cat, orange and enormous, watched them from atop a stack of vintage encyclopedias. They wandered separately at first, each drawn to different sections. Vincent found himself in the science section, running his fingers along spines of books about physics and innovation. Then he noticed a slim volume about environmental technology, and his hand stopped. Grace would have loved this book. The thought came without the usual stab of pain. Instead, it felt like remembrance without punishment. He pulled the book from the shelf and carried it with him. Shared stories an hour later. They met in the store's small cafe area, each carrying a stack of books. Olivia had found poetry, a cookbook focused on coastal cuisine, and a battered copy of a novel about second chances. Vincent had the environmental text, and surprisingly, a book of photographs documenting Seattle's transformation over decades. "I have not bought a book for pleasure in years," Vincent said, settling into a worn leather chair across from her. "Everything I read is for work, for staying ahead of trends." "When did you stop reading for joy?" Olivia asked, accepting a cup of tea from the cafe counter. Vincent thought back. "After Grace died. She was the one who gave me books, who insisted I read things that had nothing to do with my major. Poetry, philosophy, novels about people who did not exist. I told her it was a waste of time. But you read them anyway, Olivia guessed. Every single one. Vincent smiled at the memory. She would quiz me afterward, demand my opinions, argue when she disagreed. Some of our best conversations happened because of books I initially did not want to read. Olivia opened her poetry collection, flipping through pages until she found something. Listen to this. The heart has its own memory, keeping what the mind tries to discard. In forgotten corners, love waits patiently for permission to return. The words hung between them, profound in their simplicity. Grace used to say something similar, Vincent said quietly. She told me that love does not die when people do, just changes shape, becomes memory, becomes the reason you keep going even when going forward feels impossible. The question of moving forward they talked until the bookstore announced closing time. Outside, the spring evening had turned cool, the sun setting behind buildings in shades of amber and rose. They walked without destination, following streets that curved through the old neighborhood. "Can I ask you something personal?" Olivia said as they paused near a fountain in Occidental Square. Vincent nodded, surprised that he wanted her to ask, wanted to answer truthfully. "Why did you really invite me today?" This was not about books. He could have deflected, made it casual. Instead, he chose honesty. "Because being around you makes me remember who I used to be. Not the grief-stricken kid who lost everything, but the person before that. The one who believed the world was full of possibilities." Olivia turned to face him fully. "That person is still inside you, Vincent. He has just been waiting for permission to exist again." "I am afraid," he admitted, the words costing him something, "afraid that if I let myself feel again, I will lose control. My entire life is built on control, on keeping emotions separate from decisions. And how is that working?" Olivia asked gently. Vincent laughed, the sound bitter and honest. "I am successful and miserable. I have everything money can buy and nothing that actually matters." The storm returns as if summoned by the acknowledgement of his emptiness. The sky opened. Rain came. Suddenly, the way it often did in Seattle, turning from threat to downpour in seconds. They ran, laughing despite the cold water, ducking under awnings and finally into the covered entrance of an old theater. They stood catching their breath, soaked through, and suddenly the absurdity of it struck them both. Vincent Hayes, Billionaire, standing drenched in a theater doorway, laughing like he had not laughed in years. Olivia beside him, her hair plastered to her face, eyes bright with joy. "This is ridiculous," Vincent said. "This is living," Olivia countered. Something shifted in that moment. The careful distance they had maintained dissolved in the rain. Vincent saw Olivia not as a connection to his past, but as a person in her own right. Kind, perceptive, carrying her own losses with grace he could only aspire to. "Come on," she said, grabbing his hand. "My apartment is 2 blocks away. We can dry off, and I will make tea that is actually warm." He should have declined to maintain professional boundaries. Instead, he let her lead him through the rain, her hand warm in his. Both of them running like children who had forgotten why adults do not run in storms. The cedar chest Olivia's apartment was small, but filled with light, even on a rainy evening. Books lined every wall. Plants crowded the windowsills. Photographs of people who were clearly loved covered the refrigerator. It felt like the opposite of Vincent's sterile penthouse. It felt like a home. She brought towels, made tea, and they sat on her worn couch while the rain drummed against the windows. The awkwardness Vincent expected never materialized. Instead, they talked about everything and nothing. Her childhood in Oregon, his dreams before loss reshaped them. The ways grief changes people. "The cedar chest is in my bedroom closet," Olivia said during a comfortable silence. "Would you like to see what else is inside?" Vincent's heart rate increased, but he nodded. "Yes, I think I am ready," she returned, carrying a chest weathered and beautiful, the kind of furniture that holds generations of memories. She placed it on the coffee table between them and opened the lid slowly. Inside lay pieces of Grace's life. Letters tied with ribbon, a journal with a sunflower on the cover, small items, a pressed flower, concert tickets, a bracelet made of sea glass. Each object was a moment frozen in time. Vincent reached for the journal, his hands trembling. "May I?" "It is yours," Olivia said. "All of this is yours." Grace's final words, he opened the journal to a random page, dated 3 months before Grace died. Her handwriting flowed across the page, familiar and heartbreaking. Vincent is pulling away again. He does it when he is scared, builds walls, and pretends they are fortresses. He thinks I do not notice, but I see everything. I see the brilliant man he is becoming and the frightened boy he tries to hide. I love them both. Today I told him I wanted to adopt rescue dogs when we get married. He said marriage was statistically likely to fail. I said love was statistically impossible, yet here we are. He smiled that small smile that means I have won the argument. Sometimes, I worry about what would happen to him if something happened to me. He would blame himself, would turn that incredible mind toward self-punishment instead of self-compassion. So I am writing this down in case I cannot tell him myself. Vincent, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. And if I am gone, please know that loving you was the greatest adventure of my life. Please do not let my death be the end of your ability to love. Promise me you will find someone who sees you the way I see you, completely and without fear. Promise me you will let her in. Tears he had held back for 15 years finally fell, running down his face unchecked. Olivia moved closer, not touching him, but near enough that he could feel her presence, solid and supportive. She knew, he whispered. She knew exactly what I would do. She knew because she loved you, Olivia said softly, and she wanted better for you than what you have chosen. Glozed the journal carefully, reverently. He looked at Olivia through tears he no longer tried to hide. I have been so afraid of betraying her memory, afraid that moving forward meant forgetting. Memory and movement are not enemies, Olivia said. You can honor who Grace was while still becoming who you need to be. She is not asking you to forget. She is asking you to remember how to live. The rain continued outside, softer now, a gentle percussion that filled the silence between words. Vincent reached for Olivia's hand, the gesture tentative, but intentional. You have given me something I thought I lost forever, he said. Not just pieces of grace, but permission to feel again. To be human instead of just successful. Olivia squeezed his hand gently. You gave me something too. My father spent so much time preserving Grace's memory that I thought holding on was the only way to love. But watching you, seeing how grief nearly destroyed you, taught me that letting go is sometimes the greatest act of love. They sat together as evening deepened into night, the city lights beginning to glow through the rain-streaked windows. The cedar chest remained open between them. Its contents no longer secrets, but bridges between past and present. New beginnings. Vincent did not leave until late. And when he finally stood to go, something fundamental had changed. He was not the same man who had entered that bookstore hours earlier. The armor he had worn for 15 years had cracked completely, revealing the person underneath. Scarred, uncertain, but alive in ways he had forgotten were possible. At her door, he paused. Thank you, Olivia, for all of this. For seeing me when I had forgotten how to see myself. She smiled, the expression warm and real. Grace saw you first. I am just reminding you of what she already knew. What happens now? He asked. With us, I mean, are we friends? Something more? I genuinely do not know how to navigate this. We are two people learning how to be honest, Olivia said. Everything else can wait until we figure that part out. Transformation. The weeks that followed brought changes that rippled through Vincent's carefully constructed life. He started leaving work at reasonable hours. He donated to environmental causes Grace had cared about. He called Margaret more often, letting her tell stories about his parents. About the boy he had been before. Loss remade him. He and Olivia grew closer, but carefully. Both aware that whatever was building between them needed a foundation stronger than shared grief. They had coffee together in the mornings. They explored the city on weekends. They talked about books and dreams and the ways people rebuilt themselves after shattering. One evening, 3 months after finding the photograph, Vincent stood in his penthouse, and realized it no longer felt like home. It felt like a monument to the wrong things. So he called a real estate agent and began looking for something different. Something smaller, with character. With room for plants and imperfection, the beach returned a Saturday in early summer. Vincent and Olivia drove to the Olympic Peninsula, following roads Grace had loved. They found the beach where the photograph had been taken. It's the sand pale gold under cloudless sky. Vincent carried Grace's journal. Olivia carried wildflowers she had picked along the roadside. They walked to the water's edge, where waves whispered against the shore. "I made her a promise," Vincent said, opening the journal to the last entry, "and I am ready to keep it." He read Grace's final words aloud, his voice steady despite the emotion beneath. When he finished, he closed the journal and looked at Olivia. "Grace told me to find someone who sees me completely. She was describing you before you existed in my life." Olivia's eyes shimmered. "I think she was describing who you needed, not who I am. I just happened to fit." "You're more than that," Vincent said. "You were kind where I became cold, hopeful where I became cynical. You remind me that strength and softness are not opposites." They stood together at the place where Vincent's past and present converged. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, constant and changing, like memory itself. "The choice, I do not know how to do this," Vincent admitted. "How to love again without fear. How to open my heart, knowing it can break." Olivia took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You do it one day at a time, one honest moment after another. You do it imperfectly, messily, humanly. What if I fail?" "Then you fail," she said simply. "But at least you will have tried. At least you will have lived." Vincent looked down at their joined hands, then out at the water where sunlight danced across waves. He thought about Grace, about how she had believed in impossible things and made them real through sheer force of love. He thought about the man he had become and the man he might still be. "I want to try," he said. "With you, if you are willing. I want to build something real instead of just successful." Olivia smiled, the expression radiant. "I am terrified too, but I think that is the point. Love is not supposed to feel safe. It is supposed to feel true." They stayed on that beach until sunset painted the sky in impossible colors. They talked about the future not with certainty, but with possibility. They made no grand promises. Only the commitment to keep showing up, to keep being honest, to keep trying. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, Vincent placed the wildflowers on the water. A small offering to the girl who had loved him first and loved him enough to want him whole. The waves carried them away gently, and he felt something inside him finally release. Full circle months later, on a cool autumn evening, Vincent stood in his new home. It was smaller than the penthouse, filled with books and plants and photographs. Margaret had helped him choose furniture that was comfortable instead of impressive. Olivia had taught him that homes should feel lived in rather than displayed. He was cooking dinner, something he had learned to do from online tutorials and patient instruction from Olivia. The kitchen smelled of garlic and herbs. Music played from a speaker. Life felt full in ways that had nothing to do with bank accounts or business achievements. When Olivia arrived, letting herself in with the key he had given her, she found him attempting to flip vegetables in a pan with mixed success. She laughed, the sound filling the space with warmth, came to help. They cooked together, moving around each other with the easy familiarity of people learning each other's rhythms. They ate dinner talking about their days, about small frustrations and small joys. They cleaned dishes side by side, a simple domestic routine that felt profound in its ordinariness. Later, sitting on the couch with tea and the comfortable silence of people who no longer needed to fill every moment with words, Vincent pulled out the photograph that had started everything. He looked at it, seeing not just loss, but the beginning of his journey back to himself. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" Olivia asked, following his gaze. Vincent considered the question seriously. "No, I loved Grace, will always love her, but I cannot live in the past. She taught me that love is not about holding on. It is about letting life transform you." He set the photograph on the mantel next to a new picture, one of him and Olivia laughing at the bookstore. caught by a street photographer who happened to capture joy in motion. "She would approve of you," Vincent said, looking at Olivia. "Of us. She wanted me to find someone who reminded me how to be fully alive." "You do that every day." Olivia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "We are quite a pair." "To people who almost forgot how to feel, teaching each other to be brave? Is that what we are doing?" Vincent asked, wrapping his arm around her. "That is exactly what we are doing." The promise kept that night, alone before sleep. Vincent stood at his window looking out at the city. It looked different now, less like a battleground to conquer and more like a community to contribute to. He had started mentoring young entrepreneurs, focusing on those who wanted to use technology for environmental good. Grace's dream continued through his actions. He thought about the journey from that storm-dark office to this moment. How a single photograph had cracked open a life built on avoidance. How Olivia had carried pieces of his past, without knowing she was delivering his future. He had spent 15 years running from pain, building walls so high that nothing could reach him. It took a kind woman with a cedar chest full of memories to show him that walls do not protect. They imprisoned. Vincent picked up his phone and sent a message to Olivia. "Thank you for teaching me that it is never too late to keep a promise." Her response came quickly. "Which promise?" He smiled, typing. "To live. To love. To believe in impossible things. Grace asked me to find someone who would help me remember. I found you." 3 dots appeared, then, "You found yourself." I just held the mirror. Vincent set down his phone and returned to the window. The city stretched before him, full of people with their own stories of loss and recovery, their own journeys from darkness toward light. He was one among millions, no longer separate, no longer alone. In the reflection of the glass, he saw himself clearly for the first time in years. Not the grief-hardened billionaire, not the boy who lost everything, but the man he was becoming, scarred but healing, imperfect but trying, afraid but brave enough to love anyway. The photograph on the mantel caught moonlight. Grace's smile, eternally bright, eternally young, but now it felt less like a ghost and more like a blessing. She had loved him enough to want his happiness beyond her own existence, and he had finally loved her enough to honor that wish. Vincent returned to bed, to the life he was building, one honest day at a time. Tomorrow, he would wake up and continue the work of being human, of staying open, of choosing connection over protection. Grace had been right all along. Love did not die. It transformed, evolved, became the foundation upon which new love could grow. The past did not need to be forgotten. It needed to be integrated, honored, and used as fuel for a future built on both memory and possibility, as sleep claimed him. Vincent's last thought was simple and profound. He had kept his promise. He had found someone who believed in impossible things. And together, they were building a world where broken hearts could heal, where second chances were not just possible, but necessary, where love in all its forms was the only thing that truly mattered. The drawer had held more than a photograph. It had held the key to his own transformation, and he had been brave enough finally to use it.